There are plenty of people with degrees and advanced degrees who are still living at home because they can't find jobs. That's the absolute priority. But is it worth it in the long run? That's a personal decision, and that's a tough one. You got to think long term, and when you're 20 years old, it's hard to think long term. You're thinking for today, right? I told you my son, he's got a $100,000 student debt.
The philosopher?
The philosopher.
Wow.
And he's going to be paying that for 25 years, monthly payment.
That's a lot for him to think about.
It's a lot to think about. He's not making a lot of money. Does he regret it? No.
But you know, he said something that I want to...
But you're right.
Okay.
I mean, my answer is to really look at the data, right? And look at what you're going to be getting a degree in, how much debt you'd actually be coming out with on the other side, and what kind of school you're going to, right? Are you going to a school where 90+% of the students graduate, where you're getting an engineering degree that will actually pay off and is actually employable? Or are you going to a school where only half the students graduate and you're getting an English degree and you're unsure that you'll have employable skills? And I am much less convinced and would probably particularly counsel someone who is already going to be paid 70 cents on the dollar on average, unfortunately, to think really long and hard about alternative choices. And if there's ways that you can get ahead that don't involve spending 4 years spending that money and taking the 4 years of opportunity cost that you have to spend.
But you said something, I just wanted to, so it's out there on the radar, you said, you know, with parents supporting where these kids are going to live and go to school, a lot of people don't have parents supporting them going to school. A lot of them aren't giving them places to live. I just put that out there for food for thought. And also, I lament the fact, and I'm just putting it, it's first on questions, that we have lost this, just this respect for a liberal arts education, where people are exposed to so many areas of thought and learning. So I just throw that out there in case that's first on questions. Oh, it did. Look, 2 hands went up right away. 3, 4.
So my question is, since so many people are going to college, the value of the degree is diminishing. What do you guys think are the effects of that?
Would you repeat her question?
Said with so many people going to college, the value of the degree seems to be diminishing, and what are your thoughts on that?
The New America Foundation did some really great work last September where they looked at 10-year time horizons of the income outcomes of people who had taken federal financial aid 10 years down the line. And 25% of the students who had taken financial aid at schools had no significant income earnings 10 years down the line. And given this is a biased data set because you're looking only at people who took federal financial aid, and in this case, this is probably going to skew the data to be worse because you're excluding the people who paid for college up front and whose families can probably already employ them. But, you know, if only half of students graduate and you only have a 25% chance of increasing your income 10 years down the line, the math on that isn't a very pretty picture.
See, and I would say this is a question about the value of education. Are we going to college just so we get high-paying jobs?
Yep.
Is that the only motivation that you should have to go to college?
Then it should be free.
Well, yeah,
If
sure.
it's free and I can take any class I want, that's a great system. But if I got to pay for it, I got decisions to make.
But are you going to be happy if you choose a career path or a major that's going to make you miserable the rest of your life? You might as well then do
Better
something
than if you
else
declare
and
bankruptcy,
skilled and
probably.
not invest the money in college. That's what I would say. But if you have a liberal arts education, your mind is expanded, you're learning things you never thought you would, options are become available, other career paths become available to you, you have options in your future. But if you tell your kid, I want you to go get an engineering degree, so you make a lot of money, and your kid says, but I hate engineering. There's nothing worse than spending your life doing a job you hate.
You could also build on a degree, too. If you
Sure.
came out with business and said, this sucks, you can go another path
You use
and
that?
add to it. Yeah.
Look how many people get law degrees, and they use that to inform other career paths.
They become comedians.
Or they're engineers, and they turn around and teach public school.
Or sue their law school for false advertising, like in New York.
We have a question
Actually happening right now.
So I find this a very interesting discussion. I've actually been in social policy research for a very long time and focused on higher ed and adult ed. And I think my issue here is that, and I want to push you guys a little bit because I think just by saying an education is important, going to college is important, a liberal arts degree, but this isn't an option for a lot of students. And just saying, well, you should go, getting a college degree, you'll come out and, you'll be better off, isn't an option for a lot of kids. A lot of poor, low-income kids, and when we say, you can go to school and you can take out loans, well, a lot of kids have to work. And I mean, this is a real issue, and a lot of them are going to community colleges, but there's still this real, economic issue with low-income students, and I don't think it's very easy to say either way that you can tell students, well, you should, explaining to them that the benefit of college when they have to be working at the same time.
So I agree, and I think we should put energy to changing the system so it is available for more kids. Absolutely. We got to change the system because it has become the barrier.
We do have one question here in the back. Yes, sir.
This is for the gentleman on the left. I missed your name. We arrived here late. I've been thinking about one thing you said, and I want to make sure I understand it. I think you said that if you're a person that would make 70 cents on the dollar, I guess you're talking about women.
Yeah.
Well, and then you're saying if you're a woman, you should consider other paths. Doesn't that further disadvantage women?
The point I was making was building on what this gentleman said here. If you're looking at compounded opportunity cost, the opportunity cost is going to be greater for someone who's going to have more disadvantage coming out of the end. That's the point you were making, correct? Yeah, I was just agreeing with his point, basically.
Any questions over on this side? Yes.
Hi, I'm a senior in high school and I'm currently applying to college. I was going to ask, you said, Mr. Stevens, about like how there's studies that show that like higher rates of college graduation have like higher or lower rates of unemployment. That's not been proven to be like associated, or like that's not that they cause each other. But I think that there's like an angle of that of like if you go to a job and there's not a college degree on your resume, there's a good chance you're not going to get that job because like that's like a direct thing. And so are you calling for people to change the way they look at college, or are you calling for people to change college itself?
So I think we've got two things here. The point that I made about lack of causation, I think is a different point than what employers are looking for on the resume. And you're absolutely correct that on average, people are currently looking at whether or not you have a college degree as a filtering mechanism. That said, we see it changing. Ernst & Young, for example, announced earlier this year that globally they're removing degree requirements from their job postings because they don't see over the long term that someone who has a degree performs higher than someone who doesn't. And so I think I think there's a distinction to be made between whether or not college is causal or not is different than whether or not having a college degree makes you more likely to be hired. Currently, that's an absolutely true statement.
Any other questions on this? Oh, yes, yes, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for coming, by the way. So we're obviously talking about this because the cost of education is very scary right now. As someone in their 30s who's just had twin boys, the cost of education in 18 years seems extra scary. Maybe you could talk about sort of the long view on whether you feel like the costs are really going to keep escalating at the same pace they are now, so that, you know, college becomes a luxury good. If I'm going to need to start talking to my kids about alternate paths, if it does become a luxury good.
I think one of the things that's really interesting about the point that you made about the economics is that because college is so unaffordable and out of the question for some people, we're in a really interesting point where there's a lot of innovation going on in this space, and there will be alternatives that cost less than the current system by the time your kids are grown up. I think the other point that I'd like to piggyback on what you said is that, you know, we're talking about college in this context as a 4-year experience that you go to after high school. More than half of all college students in this country are adult learners, and that trend is going to continue. And we are going to see college as a gym membership that you go to and be part of over the course of your lifetime. But the idea that it's synchronous and place-based is going to go out the window in the next 10 to 20 years. In the last 12 months, we've seen 4 private colleges go bankrupt or donate themselves to states because they can't, because they're insolvent. And that is going to continue. I'm friends with a couple of folks who are on college boards the colleges themselves are incredibly in debt because they took out massive loans to build huge student rec centers and so on and so forth. And at some point, this will come crashing down. I heard rumblings of a well-known school on the East Coast wanting to raise their tuition to $70,000 a year. At some point, this breaks, and it'll be before your kids grow up.
Wait, one more question on this side, then I'll come around to the middle and the other side.
I heard something about financial aid here. Is that a lower class of citizens? I mean, as far as getting an education, do they have not as good an education as those people that are going and paying for their own, your standard college tuitions? I mean, financial aid is big.
Financial aid is federally administered. There are grants and loans. They're mostly loans, though, and the government makes a massive profit on them. The U.S. government makes about $50 billion a year in profit on financial aid loans in this country, and they're not even at particularly low interest rates. If you're a person with good credit, you can get a private loan for way less than the government charges.
So not necessarily.
Yes, necessarily. Personal loans are about 3% in this country. If you're someone who's wealthy and has means, 6.5% is the standard for federal aid.
Why were you saying not necessarily?
Well, I think it's really treacherous out there when they started looking at student loans, and there's a lot of fine print. It's hard to know, and that's where I think we need to put a lot of energy into helping young people make smart decisions about which loans they take, because there's a lot of hidden language in there. But if you're eligible for financial aid and you're in a college campus, you don't walk around with a badge on you. You're getting the same education, I think, than anyone else.
One question here in the middle.
Hi. So I have a quick question for both of you about families that have multiple children, like that man over there, wonderful gentleman. Congratulations, by the way. And in my situation, for example, I'm 16. I'm a senior in high school with all of these guys right here. And just recently, my parents decided to have 2 more kids out of nowhere. And I in a sense, kind of started thinking more about them. And I understand now college is expensive as it is. And like we had discussed, it may or may not be more expensive later on when they go to college. So my situation is that I'm joining the military so that I could later on go to college on the GI Bill, and so that I can focus, that my parents can focus on my siblings. So I just want to know what your guys' thoughts are on households that many have multiple children and have to pay for 2, 3, maybe even 4 tuitions.
Well, that's quite a sacrifice you're making for your family. That's for sure. It's amazing that you're volunteering to do that. I don't know the answers to this financial burden that families are forced to face. That becomes the indicator of whether my children will go to college or not. It's just frightening. It's disheartening. It's un-American. And
it's actually very American in some ways. It's a capitalist country.
Yeah, but this young man is going to go serve our country so he can get an education, because the country isn't giving him an opportunity unless he does that. That's a huge sacrifice.
And this is why I think, well, I was going to say...
No, he may want to. Yes, that could very well be your choice. There's no disrespect to that. But I'm saying there's so many people that is the only choice. That is what I meant.
And I think this goes back to what I said earlier about state and federal funding being so disconnected on education in this country. The fact that we have 50 different departments that are each funding their own institutions at a state level is ridiculous. There is no need for that. We should just cut all of them and have one instead of 49 extras. That to me is the root of why education is so expensive in this country. And the reason for that is this very American separation of state and federal power. And in some ways, it's important, but on most levels, I think it's pretty stupid.
We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Yes.
The last thing you mean, administration is expensive. To cut down on administration. It is expensive, it's true. And you probably know that. And my other question is, basically, are there enough jobs? Be it you go to college or don't go to college, is the job market just low in our country? It's not the 50s anymore. What's your answer to that?
Yeah. The answer is that we need basic income. Basic income for, do you guys know what basic income is? So basic income is the idea that instead of having the earned income tax credit like we currently do, is that everyone gets an unconditional cash transfer from the government, regardless of how much money you earn, and then you just pay taxes on how much you earn. And I think it's the thing that will save our democracy from when the robots take our jobs, right? We saw that yesterday, Uber just debuted their first self-driving truck to deliver Budweiser in Colorado. 30% of the jobs in this country are driving cars. Those are going to be wiped out in the next 10 years. And I think we need to do something fundamentally different, like basic income, that goes far beyond education, if we really want to address those problems. To have a basic income, to enable people to live happy, productive lives when there aren't jobs.
We have one more question back here, yes?
So I'm basically a 18 or 17-year-old guy working at a job making $11 an hour. And you said that back in the day, I think that in the 80s, like 30 years ago, that someone making minimum wage could pay for college for a year. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Working a summer, yeah.
Yes.
Not
summer.
Really. No, not in my day.
Well, okay. Well, why is it different today? Like, why can't I maybe pay for my own tuition if I work 30 hours a week or something like that?
Well, one part is that wages have stagnated, and the other is that the cost of college has gone up about 350% since the 80s. And you're right. I'm talking only about tuition, not about living expenses. So there's a caveat there. But there's two sides to that. If you want to go deeper into why the cost of college has skyrocketed, a lot of it actually has to do with the GI Bill. When the GI Bill was put out in the late 1940s, the way it was structured was not so that the incentives of the students were aligned with the colleges, but the incentives of the colleges were to raise tuition as much as they could so they could get more money from the government to fund other programs. And that set off this Baumol's cost disease of building bigger and bigger institutions, upping the spending, hiring more staff, so that every institution could try and compete with Harvard. That's the very short version. There's a great documentary called Ivory Tower that goes over all this, if you want to watch it.
Maureen, we're out of time for questions, but if you can wrap us up.